Chilly here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mars hour, so day which is Jupiter night. And my previous astrology video was concerning the 2030 Mars Saturn Lilith uh, around Beta Persei. And I looked at Saturn. When was it last? And Beta Persei, and that was around 9/11. Okay, basically the 2000 and 2001. With the retrograde, the back and forth. And then actually, I'm not going to say a name because of the heaviness of the topic. I saw a chart of actually very, 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 very talented musician that was born with that timestamp. And first of all, it brought in me all the things like I was just finishing high school, going to university, and so on and so forth. But also the realization that people that were born with that timestamp might have been, some of them, desensitized to bury their siblings in, I don't know if it's going to be their Saturn return. And particularly one thing that stood out was something that was wordplay on buried, which in the desensitization ritual of use means to bury the Gegenüber. There's one living child, one dead child, and somebody's supposed to bury someone who is kind of like the innocent to them, but it's an actual murder. And when I saw that timestamp just popped, and I was like, oh my God, this is desensitization to bury people in mass graves, as happens with Uranus, with Saturn Beta Persei. We don't like to address it, but Beta Persei is kind of like what's Me Too went too far meets dead bodies upon dead bodies. It's kind of like it's always that way, and there were just a couple of songs I was writing and recording as fragments, and in between that episode and this episode, where I was like, oh gosh, this really is a desensitization to actual world events. So the spirit of the time, we had Ketu in Capricorn, which would be ruled by that Saturn, and that would add, for the 9/11, it was releasing the materialization of a big structure to do with trade, bonds, and so on, which was the World Trade Center. Rahu was in Cancer. 2030, we're going to have Ketu in Gemini, which is releasing a twin city structure that can have to do with military or entrepreneurship. It can be like innovative city, digital city that is somewhat entrepreneurial or innovative or even new, with Mars, Saturn, Lilith, and that is digital sex trafficking. and it's also releasing bombs. So this place might be built and then bombed, or might be bombed by then. What can I say for the people that have Saturn returns at 2030? And those were the people who were born in 2000, 2001. First of all, you folks, some of you have Uranus conjoining Deneb Algedi. And what's important to understand about that, because basically you have a Saturn square Uranus in your charts. It's a separation from the square, but a separation only several degrees. We had Saturn square Uranus during COVID lockdowns. And by the way, from the same signs, which accumulated to 7 October and the State of Palestine, genocide, digital prison, Rafah, State of Palestine, genocide. Okay. Yeah. And now the war with Iran, but Saturn is no longer in Aquarius. What you need to remember about Uranus Deneb Algedi is that is governing by Saturn in Beta Persei. Deneb Algedi and Beta Persei are squaring because Deneb Algedi is to do with wealth redistribution, but sex is not something that can be traded or distributed. Okay, basically, with Deneb Algedi, not redistributing wealth is the offense. With Beta Persei, forcing distribution of sex is the crime against humanity. So these are conflicting crimes against humanity. And okay, to make it even more clear with the story of Sedna, there were societies where, let's say, if a man was going out to hunt, and another man had to fill in his place in bed, or yes, or if somebody was coming to visit, then a woman would have to basically please him sexually. High suicide rates and famine, persecution all the way up to the north, those would be the Inuit people. And to the extent that it matches Sami traditions, I may hear that is true from the Arctic. So, yes, but this is a nation that's more important for them to remember that is actually Israel and Palestine, because we are the ones next to the equator. and, and it's pretty cold in the Arctic, is what I'm saying. But it's true. So first of all, we need to remember those things regarding the those who will have Saturn return in 2030, which is those born in 2000 and 2001. Uranus, Deneb Algedi, is favoring revolution by Kindertransport 10 o'clock, which is making sure that children will not have to participate in desensitizing ritual abuse. That was the death camps. That was the essence of the death camps. Like for me, when I attended to political assassination prevention, and everybody were the Petering and so on and so forth, and I'm like, wait a fucking second, these people are going through a Holocaust, and they go through a Holocaust to commit the Holocaust. And so basically what they're going through is the death camps, and that's why their policies are like that. And so because I immediately knew that this is what this thing is about, I went about it in the particular way where I said, well, politicians are the ones that are extorted. It's their interest to abolish Peter rings. The state of the art. And yeah, like, well, they were the children that nobody came to save. Yeah. And understanding that with Uranus Denabalgadi is understanding that the wealth redistribution is so that people will not be children and people will not be trafficked. And basically it means that people cannot wealth redistribute by doing those things where filling up for one another's place in bed. That's the essence of the square between beta per se and animality. Both deal with wealth, both deal with the outcast, which means the underdog, with the animality can be the Robin Hood as much as the cooperative. But with animality, we have to make sure that we share resources. With beta per se, it's a resource we cannot just share or distribute without harming our sanity. And in those death cults, they would treat in beta per se as though it was Daniel Algadi. And this is also the timestamp for the 2000, which is why I got that joke about fair trade. Because sex is not something one can trade, and sex work is not work. Those that complied with sex work is work agendas in COVID found their jobs taken by AI, because AI can do both roboking and competence at work in a way that a human can't. And as well as also said that Me Too went too far. If the previous industrial revolution took the mundane jobs, this one takes the intellectuals. And as a person that saw the trafficking rings in academia, I think that's a blessed change. Because this is something that I guess is also a wave of the world where we've been tending to the mundane stuff, manual crafts, and then we had technology, so we could tend to intellectual pursuits, and then we have technology, and then we can tend to the mundane stuff again, which makes sense. Intellectuals fearing to lose their job need to ask themselves what they were covering up where their colleagues said the Me Too went too far. But what worries me in particular is that Saturn return generation. And this is, yeah, Pluto will be in the middle decan of Aquarius, Neptune in the middle decan of Aries. Which is quite devastating for the Saturn middle decan Scorpios or Tauruses. And that was the people that were born at 1998-9. They have the Saturn in Taurus, and the people that were born either quite recently at the 2010 or 12, or either 12 or 10, 12 or 10 or 12 to 13, or the people that were born like me, 1984, and so on and so forth. These are the people that are going to have this Pluto in Aquarius in 2030, squaring their Saturn, or what they call the Corvinaut. Actually, I was the Saturn square Pluto of the 89s, 87 to 89s, and it's not easy being the Saturn, and as a person that went to Saturn square and Pluto, I can attest that it's not easy when Saturn squares your Pluto. Yeah, it is as a part of that transit, which was main transit for me, but this was beyond overwhelming. All while addressing the Saturn Pluto Corvinaut. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, this is me. It means structural changes from the core of the structure. More things about this Saturn return. We only have 4 years. Now would be the time to, in however many ways is possible, abolish ritual abuse. I cannot state it so clearly as for this particular transit and those Saturn returns. Those Saturn returns, and particularly, it pains me particularly because those are the people that already been through these holocausts. Okay, same for the 89s. It's kind of like, but they cannot profit off of committing such holocausts. Again, no, zero shame, zero blame. I understand this Holocaust o'clock, but zero shame, zero blame. Just tending to it. Because these timelines of complete lineages, persecution, and all those things, people will not be able to, they could talk later about blood libels, but it will be later. Okay, it was already would be with the mass graves that have mass graved. Um, the essence to remember is that Deneb Algadi ends where sexuality starts. What do I mean by that? Deneb Algadi protects from rapists, yes, but it ends where sexuality starts in the sense that the resources that Deneb Al-Gadi steals from the rich to bring to the poor cannot be sex. And in fact, it doesn't want to, because it might meet the fate of the elite, which was, okay, let's say, for example, with Martin Luther King, he said, even Martin Luther King threw a word about black men to rape white women as resistance. Um, what he didn't know is what white women went through. And he can watch Anneke Lucas' podcast From the Grave to further understand. He said, yeah, BIPOC children died. This is true. But in those circumstances, one even asks themselves, why were they not allowed to die? Not talking about Anneke Lucas, she was smuggled out of the cult, but the people that are in there. And this is why I said Deneb Al-Gadi ends. The Robin Hood effect of Deneb Al-Gadi ends when it comes to sex, because it's a different zone. Deneb Al-Gadi can protect from the rapists and abolish rape, but that's the best use of Deneb Al-Gadi. Because any other thing, better per se, okay, for example, Robobank was a cooperative. Better per se is becoming dead bodies upon dead bodies, and the desensitization of people that expect the desensitization to work. No, it means that in real time they will be both bombarded by the traumas that they've been through, and okay, for example, there was a case of whistleblower from the banking field, and he was abused as a child, and in one of the ritual, and he reached the rituals where they had to do things to children, and yes, and that was something that broke him so much that because he couldn't do it, he was litigated for I think it's called white collar crimes, and it's because he couldn't do the ritual. Like, I believe him because they take the rituals are to get away with the crimes, and because he couldn't do that ritual, then he was litigated, and then he was a whistleblower. He still had to do crime, and this is basically. So when we talk about Saturn returns to dead camps o'clock, the desensitization that the people were undergoing if they were born into those lineages is not going to make it easier for them during Holocaust o'clock. I mean, come Saturn, it's actually about dealing with that. It's actually about facing that. Yeah, it's actually about facing the fact that it was supposed to desensitize from committing crimes against humanity. Um, and it's going to probably operate for many of these people like it operated for Annika Lucas to watch the Trudeau Sears. For Lucas, I think it was Rahu, a Rahu thing. Born 63, 1996. Not to calculate. Saturn return. The beginning of Saturn return. I thought it was a Rahu thing. I'm not that old. Oh my God. Basically, Annika Lucas is a survivor of child trafficking rings for the elite, and watching the Trudeau series in the 1990s prompted memories, and then would be the beginning of her journey exposing basically what's behind. And she knew Michel Nihul, not in favorable circumstances, but it brought that I refer to as Saint Michel. They replaced everybody around Dutroux and put Saint Michel. And Lisa's father didn't want to hear about this monster that is speaking about the network. So Falcon, but here's the thing. That Trudeau series, if you go to 1996, give us a 1996 day in the life of 1996. I don't know if I can have a natal chart. Let's see how is the AI doing. So January 1996. Let's pick the full moon in Cancer. White March. And what's that stellium in Aquarius? Mars, Uranus? Oh, Mars, Uranus, Neptune in Capricorn. That's that 1996. My voice has been partially kidnapped. I don't know what they're doing with that. When I have my voice. um, Rahu, oh my God, Rahu was 22 in Libra on that particular day. Saturn was in Pisces. Yeah. So this would be probably the coming too. Because those are Saturn Aquariuses. But this is Uranus, Mars, Neptune at the last degrees of Capricorn. Ooh la la. That was woo woo. But unfortunately, with the dual nature of Neptune, there were also rituals at the time. At the time of the White March. Lilith in Cancer. That was the Trudeau Sears. Uranus, Neptune, Mars. Sol, Jupiter. No, for me it was Sol, Jupiter. Pluto was ingressing to Sagittarius. Yes, this was school shootings o'clock. And if we haven't connected the dots and if we did call it satanic panic, then right now we're having Saturn in Pisces was Saturn returned for the Trudeau Sears, which ended up with the Epstein list unveiling upon the ingress of Saturn to Aries, and the reopening of some Rolodex files. So for the Saturn returns at 2030. Um, Particularly where the wealth of nations was reliant on trafficking. Oh, here is the thing: the Epstein files are out. What do we do about this? Because if we don't, we're gonna meet those things. Venus sign is also it was also in the 1940s. Okay, around the ghettos there were artists playing music, um, showing as if it was a cultural place, a lovely place to live, and so on and so forth. So this is tending to the castration, the ritual abuse, the horrors that the artists are going through. Mind you, also Adolf Hitler was an artist. He was a failed artist. No, doesn't matter. If you hone in on whether Hitler was a good artist or a bad artist, you're missing the point. And the point is what is done to the artists. By the way, the Saturn, is around the midheaven of Art with the Stars. That tends exactly to these topics. And like I said, it's not easy, but this is where that Saturn return, basically the people that went through those things are going to see the world going through those things. And it's going to awaken in them various things that are not predictable, like dissociations that begin to unfold, um, remembering things that they're not sure if are real or not. Um, and even if they are conscious offenders, this what is likely to happen with this Saturn returns is that the desensitization, the Saturn Neptune is doing that right now as well, but by 2030 the Saturn returns is going to be the desensitization is no longer working. That is my prediction for that particular Saturn return. Um, and for the people born in that timestamp, they really have to remember that the Me Too did not go too far and sex work is not work. And it's not about getting another job, it's about abolishing rape and slavery. And particularly, when it not to tag as crazy, the people that talk about this. Um, the latter, I cannot even begin to stress enough, is something that I don't even want. Like I said before COVID, I said I don't wish on my enemies to be my enemies, in meaning I don't mean on my enemies to go through what I'm dealing with. And yeah, this is something that is, the Saturn Neptune right now is doing a good job of awakening from the desensitization to the crimes against humanity on a worldly scale. But the dual nature of Neptune would be desensitization rituals that also take place at this time, kind of like the White March. But where we're going to reach the end decan of Uranus, Saturn, Mars, Lilith, Neptune is not going to be in seeing this aspect from dissociation effect. It's not going to be squaring, but it's also not going to be Neptunian, in the sense that a lot of people thought that they got away with that in the Rolodex because there were rituals at the White March. And right now, as well, Neptune is still present. But that's not going to happen in 2030. And people have to remember that there was a ghetto that was named Ghetto Lodge. Okay, and that is a reminder. Um, okay. Um, Now, to make it even more complicated, those mind control campaigns love to make people believe they did things they didn't do. I think we're gonna have a little siren. No, not yet. If you watch the episode with Douglas McIntyre of how his parent uses his body to commit murder and says that the child did it. So with MK Ultra and MK Often, they even try to make people admit things that they genuinely didn't do. So this is really a really complicated issue, and Neptune is not going to be seeing this aspect from not a conflictual aspect and not a favorable aspect, which means that the dissociation, good thing, bad thing, who knows, is not going to be there for the people, and they will not be able to be so desensitized in an immediate way as they could be during the 1990s, during 1996, and today. And by the way, also during COVID, because Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto were sextiling Neptune. And so, for example, in 2019, when they spoke about ritual abuse, I was undergoing that, so I did not know that there was even a conversation about that. And actually, one of the personalities of a psychologist um, that was partaking in those rituals tried to show me for that everybody's pedophile, and here were rituals and there were rituals, and I was like, what is he talking about? What is it? What is that thing? Um, and he had a couple of personalities that was suddenly spiked. Um, and then they tried to access my floaters during COVID. I understood it only when I watched the interview with Dr. Miller. Um, and and I wasn't sure if they were trying to retrain my floaters in the martial arts or something like that. But my insistence was zero rape, zero slavery, and I needed to see proof that it's zero rape, zero slavery, and which is why I never consented. Um, and also how that thing was eventually revealed to me. Because let's say if they would do zero rape, zero slavery, probably I would go with them. But because they didn't do zero rape, zero slavery, then I didn't go with them. They tried to show me as it's not possible to prevent rape, not possible to this, not possible to that. I said, then you have nothing to offer. Yes, if it's not possible to live a life, and to live a life is only with zero rape, zero slavery. If it's not possible to live a life, then there's no, okay, basically they're not offering life. Um, so, yep. So Saturn returns in 2030, going to be um, very, very challenging. Saturn returns. And what to prepare? The better per se story. Not to cooperate with better per se stories, which means not to blame the victim, um, not to portray as crazy the people who bring testimonies. Acknowledge that when it comes to ritual abuse, the perpetrator was raped, not in the past, during being perpetrator. Um, and that with dissociation, it can be that, let's say, person A is tortured, person B is tortured, person C that is tortured takes the consciousness of person A to attack person B. Okay, encryption. Um, yeah, this is, and all of that can happen in the astral non-visible plane. To make it even more dramatic, AI and technologies also operate in those fields. Let's just say the Holocaust was way more technological than we perceive. And technology does not mean not occultistic. Yeah. So the awareness of that and everything that I said about not to blame the victim, meaning there's no such thing as sex work, there's no such thing as whore prostitute. There is such thing as rapist, and that rapist in those rituals, in the context of those rituals, were tortured while he was a perpetrator. So it's basically about re-regulating and balancing the nervous system. And basically booting the technology that is involved. Yeah, understand the connection between those ritual abuses that they are done on wealth consolidation, on natural resources and the real estate around them, and any resources like art and oligarchy, okay? Media conglomerates. Again, the Epstein files are out, and of course science, academics, and even occult and astrology. For example, my channel is not too big because I don't do weird hand gestures. Which, if you'd watch Spirit of Matter, Water Expands Upon Cooling, you will see an episode where where I was channeling and I did it was the peace sign, not knowing what it was, and then when I learned about this, I resisted that and I went through horrible things. And beware of the use of religion. Okay, but religion trafficking rings, arranged marriage agendas. Okay, in those the ring is a Peter ring. So if one is already married, talking about the 2030 Saturn returns, divorce the Peter ring today. Uranus will go over your Saturn. That would be the time to divorce the Peter ring, even if you're just married. I said what I said and I mean what I mean. Because the extortion cults are extorted themselves. And crimes against humanity, and I'm not talking about what happened, I'm talking about 2030. Okay? When I say crimes against humanity, in this case, of course, there are many crimes against humanity happening all the time. I'm talking about 2030 crime against humanity. Again, but this is particularly for the Saturn returns. If there are Ghislaine, Maxwell, and Epsteins, Now would be the time to do everything within one's reach to um, abolish, okay, those endeavors. Um, and and here's the thing: for the Saturn returns there, y'all got Uranus with Anavalgadi. Y'all can hack the system, dismantle the system. Um, okay, yeah, make dismantle any targeting for trafficking using technology. That's what that Uranus Anavalgadi should be doing. Those that are tending to that, they are better prepared, better equipped. And again, it's trajectory because of those things, the yeah the um, look at this Mars 29 degrees Aquarius as I'm speaking about this Saturn Neptune. Okay, Saturn exiting the 1 degree orb, slowly separating from the 1 degree orb of conjunction with Neptune. Sol 11th degree Pisces, and the nodes ingress to the degree where the eclipse will take place. Lilith is about to ingress to square the degrees, the nodes, and we'll have in one day the last, sorry, gassy giant. We cannot talk about so much Uranian energy without any farts or burps. Okay, it's like that's illegal. Um, but the lunar eclipse would be full lunar eclipse, and it will be the last full lunar eclipse until New Year's of 2028. Um, which means that the people are going to be massively affected. The fact that this information about 2030 is arriving right now, and to the particular artist, if you identify yourself, know that I love and support what you do. I just noticed those things as things that came up in me, being exposed to the art within the context that I'm learning to to understand myself now. It is my Neptune square, which has to do a lot with the arts, um, and there is a Saturn. There's a Saturn Neptune square there. Um, I think there's a Saturn Neptune square there from my side, because you will be having Neptunes in Aquarius, and that would be squaring my Saturn. So I'm having now the Saturn square into my Neptune. You'll be having my Saturn square into your Neptune. So much love and support. Um, uh, and and this is yes, while this is Saturn Neptune can be kind of like the hard aspect, like a crisis regarding a reality check when it comes to our dreams, because Neptune is also our dreams, our manifestations, and to some degree our legacy. Um, so this is, yeah, for example, for me with Neptune Capricorn, um, I was looking at the higher ups and saying, oh, well, I shouldn't. I'm not judging the rich. I'm just trying to see what do they do so that, and then around my Neptune square, I realized what do they do. Actually, with water expands upon cooling, I had a fragment where the Corvan out, I said, oh, we do it the same thing. Okay, but I have my personality, you have your personality. And then it was like attempting to explain to me. And then the smartness of that other person is this. He went way on me, and it was like, yeah, and then I got what he wanted to say to me. I was like, oh, okay. um, that was his Saturn, Saturn squaring his Pluto. uh, yeah, not the only challenging thing that happened there. Um, yeah, it's so much so, with those types of transits, it's like you see a person doing something that is, from my perspective, that is horrendous, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's their Saturn square Pluto. Oh my gosh, they're doing that on a Saturn transit. It's kind of like, from being the victim of that, you kind of become. I'm talking about the hidden things, um, the camera things. Let's say, from being the victim of that, you become like, oh wait a second, they did it on the Saturn. um, yeah, and um, and those 2030 Saturn returns, because of Lilith. Again, because Mars, Saturn, yeah, not easy. Jupiter opposing some kind of a religious war. The Lilith. The Lilith. And it arrives, this gnosis, around, I'm called to look at it around the lunar eclipse, as the biggest lunar eclipse until New Year 2028, with Lilith squaring the nodes. So, again, zero judgment, zero grudge. Simply put, every brain cell, every energy, every tenditude that one can do to abolish ritual abuse, weapon slavery, extortion cults, to not have to rely on profits from that if they are in the perpetrator, okay, side of either side. But it's usually the perpetrators there that are. That would be, again, what can I say? I don't have all the answers, but this is where everything that promotes you to zero rape, zero slavery, zero extortion cults, zero profiting or relying on profits from extortion cults, that is your way. That is what will get you through this. Um, because, like I said, with this one, like I said at COVID, I do not wish my enemies to be my enemies. With this one, I do not wish on anyone, and particularly not when I know that they became for this because of what um, um, like I said, I don't think that there is no use speaking about this. I don't think that not speaking about this will work for anyone. It never does. This is why people speak. People like to believe that, oh, people can shut up about things and live their life. No, they can't. In fact, if they could, they would. because it would seem like a very big war that they can't do anything about. Not because of them